So it has been a very eventful couple days here in the hockey world. The draft has taken place. The first day of free agency has taken place. It's currently the second day of free agency, and just a lot of wows, a lot of terrible signings, a lot of players on the move, a lot of dollars being given out, more money than I will ever see in my lifetime. But yeah, this is Pucks and Brews. I am your host, Michael Shades Sparacino. I remember this time, Liam, alongside
Yeah.
always Liam, the Shellmaster Godimer. Liam, how are you?
I'm doing really well, Shades. It's been a while, right? I think one hiatus of an episode where we weren't together, but scheduling issues will do that. But again, great to be back on Pucks and Brews. Like you said, it's been a very eventful last couple of weeks in the hockey world between the draft and day one, and I guess the first half of day two of free agency, which there's been a lot of action. So a lot to talk about.
Yeah, let's also take a moment to recognize that Twitter was in shambles yesterday, because of course it was. And not even because of the hockey thing, just because Twitter was just being Twitter.
What a great day for us hockey fans for that to happen, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I was working like most of the day, and I was busy from pretty much the moment I left my house to go to work all the way until I went to bed. So I was barely able to keep up with anything, but that's what this morning was for. And you want to know what else this morning was for, even though it's technically afternoon at this point? It is time for an unsponsored Dunkin' cold brew.
One day we will be sponsored by Dunkin'. One day.
I hope so. That would be wonderful. Ooh, that always, the first sip always hits hard. I had one, a medium one at work the other day. I drank it in like 5 minutes. I was off the walls for a couple hours there. Like, yeah, the caffeine was just like.
Well, it's going to be a long episode, so gear up.
Yeah, we'll try to go as quickly and as smoothly as we can. As you can see, my camera is already out of focus, because it would not be a Pucks and Brews episode without my camera going out of focus.
It would not be.
And I think I just got it. Nope. All right, we'll figure this one out on the fly. So, like we said, the draft happened, free agency happened, a lot of trades, a lot of signings, and I'm gonna drink one last sip of my cold brew before we get into it. And here we go. So obviously, there were some things that happened, moves and stuff before the draft, but we'll get into that when we go alphabetically through each team, just to save ourselves some sanity, because last time we did this, we kind of went in chronological order and we were just kind of all over the place. So to save ourselves this time, we'll just go alphabetically, but let's start with draft day. Liam, obviously we got the surprise of the draft at number 2 when the Ducks picked Leo Carlsson, and that was kind of like the big, quote unquote, the first big storyline, quote unquote, because everybody knew Bedard was going first. But yeah, what would you like to say?
Yeah, well, kind of attacking the draft as a whole, I think nobody was surprised that Connor Bedard went number 1 to the Chicago Blackhawks. It was a foregone conclusion ever since the draft lottery took place that he would be a Blackhawk, and they get a generational talent. I think his draft selection really speaks for itself. But like you said, Shades, where it gets interesting is at number 2. And again, like everybody had Connor Bedard going to Chicago, everybody had Adam Fantilli going to the Anaheim Ducks, and that's not what happened. And they go off the board a little bit. They draft Leo Carlsson. He's a center. All 3 of the top 3 draft picks in this draft class are centers. So, you couldn't really go wrong positionally. It's just who you thought was a better fit. And as impressive as Fantilli was at the University of Michigan, there could be some underlying I guess, situations with the player that could have made Anaheim hesitant to select him. And if you look at Leo Carlsson, if you look at the history of European centers getting drafted early on in the draft, it's been pretty successful. So, I think this is a selection that might work out for Anaheim, but definitely a little bit risky. So, and also, let me also say, good on the Columbus Blue Jackets for finally getting their number 1 center, having Fantilli fall into their lap at number 3. So very interesting in the top 3 picks for sure.
Yeah, as soon as Anaheim made that pick, I immediately got flashbacks to 2016 and was just like, are they trying to pull a Columbus here in selecting Dubois ahead of Puljujarvi?
Yep. Well, I think it's risky. Again, like I think Fantilli is the much safer selection, but I guess the higher upside would be with Leo Carlson. So again, only time will tell. Hindsight is 2020, so we'll see. And again, this was a stacked draft from, I guess, from pick number 1 all the way to pick number 32. So
Yeah, no, people were saying for a couple of years now that this was going to be a very deep draft class, similar to 2015, where honestly, if it even becomes 90% of that, that's an insanely good draft class.
agreed.
And I'm just gonna, because I can't remember off the top of my head who went where, but I remember there were a lot of discussions surrounding Matvei Michkov, and he would end up going 7th to, of course, a division rival for us in the Philadelphia Flyers, which I was not really happy about, but yeah.
I just found it funny that the Flyers sniped Michkov before Washington would have the chance to do so, because the talk before the draft was pairing Michkov and Ovechkin together. Of course, one Russian generational player to another could be like a passing of the torch kind of thing. But like you said, a division rival for not only the Capitals, but the Rangers as well. Take a player that was sought to go top 3, going back to a couple of years ago when this draft class was initially talked about.
Yeah, they snag him right under Washington. And then we had the first hilarious moment of the draft right before Michkov was picked, when the Canadiens were picking number 5, and Carey Price goes, the Canadiens select David. Pause. I laughed hysterically at that. I don't care if that was planned or not. I thought that was hilarious.
Yeah, I don't think that was planned. I think Carey Price just, again, saw the selection and didn't do his due diligence beforehand. Again, practicing reading the name. But Reinbacher, I guess it could be tough to read off the sheet. Maybe not for a broadcaster, but again, at number 5, Montreal selects the defenseman out of the Swiss League. And look, it was another risky pick. Again, like going with a defenseman with so many talented forwards, especially down in the top 10. Look at Michkov, who is still there, Ryan Leonard as well, among others. So again, a risky selection, but Montreal knows what they're doing. So this is a big pick for Ken Hughes.
Yeah, and I was doing a thing before the draft. I scope out names solely for names, like not even the quality of prospect. I'll see a name like Dalibor Dvorsky, who went to St. Louis at 10, and I just go, that is a great name. I hope he pans out. And there were a couple great names over the course of this draft, but let's skip right ahead to number 23 in our beloved New York Rangers. They would go on to select from the United States National Team Development Program, Gabe Perreault, or Perreault. I'm not good with pronunciation of these types of last names.
It's all good. It's Gabriel Perreault. So
yes, and he is a Canadian-American college ice hockey player for Boston College. And just to scope out his stats this season with the National Team Development Program, he put up in 23 games played, 19 goals and 26 assists for 45 points, that's pretty solid. Not going to lie. Your thoughts?
Yeah, he's he's somebody who's going to play on the wing, potentially play right wing for this team because they have a ton of left wingers, right? But in the future, it's going to be good to have some prospects, especially within the forward group. The Rangers have really lacked in that particular area, going in around the last decade. And I think they really get a really solid player here at number 23, a player that probably could have gone in the top 15 in other mock drafts. But again, sometimes in the draft, things fall your way, and the Rangers get a player that I certainly didn't expect them to get at number 23. This is a player that is excellent in the offensive zone. He really fits the style of play that the NHL is kind of heading towards with speed and skill, and I think he's going to be a great addition to the team. And suddenly, when you look at the Rangers, some young forwards, again, everyone wants to talk about how old they're getting, and we'll get to that come to the time when we talk about free agency. But Brennan Othmann, Gabriel Perreault, Will Cooley, the Rangers are starting to build forward prospects in their developmental pipeline, and it's been a long time coming. So I'm really happy with this pick.
Yeah, and just to go based off of the scouting report from Corey Pronman, first off, he overall gave the Rangers a B- for the totality of the draft, which you kind of have to throw that out and revisit it 4 or 5 years down the line. But as of right now, that's what they went with. Gabriel Perreault, his player comparable is Lucas Raymond, and the analysis that he gave was he's an extremely skilled and intelligent winger who makes a ton of positive things happen inside the offensive zone. He's highly creative with unique dekes and passes with the puck at a high rate, both off the perimeter and in small areas. His puck game is clear NHL power play quality, which Rangers desperately need, even though they have a bunch of good players on the power play, but I feel like we're missing something, and he will score as a pro. We always need that. The issues in his game in his 5'11" frame and his lack of foot speed, which that is something that we are going to revisit a couple minutes from now. And he shows good second effort, can win puck battles at the junior level, although whether or not he can do that versus men is a question mark. His hockey sense is so elite that I think he can overcome those issues and become a very good top 6 winger. I hope so too, because, well, we've seen the Rangers top 6 wingers over the last few years, and it has been a very mixed bag, but I digress.
Yeah, the Rangers could use an improvement in that area. But again, the entire scouting report that you just read is very positive.
Yep.
It's exactly what we're looking for, right? Maybe the foot speed is maybe something that's not great, but again, you can work on your skating. You can be able to, generate more speed off the rush. And that's a thing that can be taught. And I think that the Rangers developmental coaches, as time progresses here, will try to focus on as they have more forwards like Gabriel Perreault coming towards the system. So I think it's great. Can't wait to see what he does. You say he's going to be playing at the collegiate level, Shades, coming out of the draft?
That's right? What it's looking like.
Okay, so we'll see what he does in the NCAA. That really is a telltale of how players are going to do in the NHL. The NCAA is a tough league to put up points. So if Pro can do it there, he can definitely do it in the pros too. So
yeah, it looks like he's going to be playing for Boston College.
There you go. Good place to play.
That is a good place to play. That's where Jack Eichel played, right?
That is where Jack played. Yep.
I'm not comparing the other two in a way. Just if he turns into Jack Eichel on the wing, sign me the hell up, like immediately. But yeah, moving on. So I'm pretty sure Rangers made a draft day trade because I originally think they had us. What?
You know who else played at Boston College?
I'm blanking.
Chris Kreider.
That's right. Yeah,
Just want to throw that in there.
I hope he turns out to be better than Chris Kreider.
We'll see.
So with going on to the Rangers' next selection, and we will be doing this for all of their selections, at number 90, from also the United States National Team Development Program, they decided to pick left-handed defenseman Drew Fortescue. That's a cool name. Who stands at 6'1", weighs 176 pounds. And he, according to Corey Pronman, is in the tier of has a chance to play NHL games. And when it comes to scouting report, Pronman also states that his skating and puck skills are NHL average. His hockey sense and his shot are both below NHL average, and his compete level is above NHL average. Honestly, I think that's always an underlooked portion of a draft prospect. So I personally like that. And the analysis, he's a decent sized defenseman who is solid in his own end. Again, Rangers need more of that, sadly. He defends well due to his mobility and also his strong physical game. He closes on checks well with his feet and separates checks from pucks. He's not a natural offensive type. That sounds similar to current Rangers defenseman Braden Schneider, just throwing that out there. He has decent puck skills and shows some moments as a puck handler, but lacks vision and offensive instincts. That lack of puck game will be an issue if he advances to higher levels. He ends off with, I think he could play games, but the defensive play will need to be outstanding.
All right, there you have it. I mean, that's really the case with most defensemen, right? Are you going to be able to tap into that offensive potential? And are you going to be able to be more than just a regular bottom six, defensive defenseman? And I think that's what it's going to come down to. But again, you said out of the U.S. development program.
Yep.
So that's 2 players of the U.S. development program. So again, Chris Drury obviously sees something he likes out of the way that their players are developed, and brings them both on alongside Gabriel Perreault. So I don't think it's a bad draft pick. I think there's good upside there, and again, low ceiling. So I mean, low floor. Low floor.
Yeah, but hey, like I just said, as I was reading through that, I was like, that sounds an awfully lot like Braden Schneider's scouting report when they drafted him, even though Schneider was a mid to late first rounder.
Yeah, I think he was labeled as, again, very similar to that. Had a little bit of offense that he's shown in the World Juniors, but again, not really a big part of his game. So again, if he can turn out to be like Braden Schneider, that would be nice. Rangers
for a
definitely need
third-round
more
pick,
of that.
that's a win.
Yeah, like you said, for sure.
On to number 152 from the Junior Sweden League, Rasmus Larsson, left-handed defenseman. 6'3", 200 pounds, is also in the tier to play NHL games. His skating and compete level are NHL average, while his puck skills and hockey sense are rated both below NHL average. Again, that seems to be the case with a lot of players picked past the second round. Just in general, nothing against them. And onto Pronman's analysis of him. His natural athleticism, it was his big selling point. Very strong skater for a guy who's 6'3", always a good thing. The way he's able to skate pucks up the ice and close on checks with his feet looks like an NHL defenseman. The rest of his game outside of that is up for debate. Scored a lot this year and showed high skill IQ, but whether that's what he projects to be as a pro is questionable. He's also a so-so defender who doesn't compete that hard in his own end. That's a little bit of a red flag there. Thus, he's rough around the edges, but has the potential to be a good defenseman. This screams a guy who is going to spend a couple years developing, and 3 to 4 years from now, we'll see what he can bring when he's trying to crack the NHL roster. What are your thoughts?
I couldn't agree with you more. I think it's, again, a risky pick. But I think when you're in the later rounds like that, I think you can afford to take risks. And I think Pronman's analysis of him, again, there's some things to really like you said, the skating, the fact that you're 6'3" and skate really well. Obviously not being as attentive in your own zone, that's a little bit worrisome. But if you can tap in again to that offensive potential that you were talking about, he had a good offensive year this past season. So again, maybe Chris Drury hits on this one, but again, really the later round picks, you're just looking for diamonds in the rough. And when you have a 6'3" defenseman who can skate really well coming out of the scouting report, not upset with that.
Yeah, I remember reading an article a while back about players being drafted in the later rounds. You're not looking for overall developed prospects. You're looking for, okay, this player has this specific trait, and we are going to draft them for that, hoping that they can make the team and then hopefully develop in better overall game as they progress. And most of the time, most of the players don't make the team, but that's just the way general managers draft. On to number 178 from Oshawa in the OHL, center Dylan Rubroek. How did I miss that name when I was going? Oh, this is a big boy, 6'7", 206 pounds. Jesus. All right. And this is a very short one. Rubroek is a huge forward with okay enough skill, but he's inconsistent. That sounds like a lot of players picked in that particular area. His skating is just okay, but I've seen worse feet on a big guy. Again, not much. This is one of those guys you just said you're hoping for a diamond in the rough. And because he's a Rangers draft pick, I hope at least he turns out to be a good minor leaguer at the worst.
6'7", that's a big boy.
Big boy. Big boy.
You know what? No matter where your skill is maybe at or where your speed's at, I think that there's a way to fit a 6'7" forward in your lineup. So again, I think it's a good move. And whether that's for the Rangers or whether that's for Hartford or whether that's even for the ECHL affiliate, just continue to accumulate talent all throughout your system. And having a 6'7" forward, again, is never, ever a bad thing. Like I said, with the previous pick, having a 6'3" defenseman who can skate really well. So that's clearly Chris Drury's MO when drafting in the later rounds. Like you just mentioned, Shades, try to find that one particular skill set or trait that you want to circle and work around and develop around, and then draft that player for that trait. And with the last three that you mentioned, that's exactly what Chris Drury did. So
exactly. And last but not least, to round it off at 183rd overall, the Rangers from Muskegon. That's the pronunciation I'm going with. From in the USHL, left wing Ty Hendricks, also a decent sized boy, 6'4", 205 pounds. And the analysis is he's a big winger with some skill, but his skating is quite heavy, and that will be his main test at higher levels. He is a California kid and played with the Anaheim Junior Ducks coming up. So 6'4", 205 pounds, not a great skater, big winger with some skill. This is the epitome of a dart throw at a draft pick, in my opinion.
Right on. Not really much more to say. 6'4" winger out of the USHL. USHL has a history of developing players quite nicely. And again, when you have a player that's already 6'4", 205 pounds, playing at the forward position, again, if his skills can be developed, Rangers might have a diamond in the rough. But again, we'll see. Time will tell.
Yeah. And that's the one thing I hate about the NHL draft compared to the NFL draft is you pick a guy at 23rd overall in the football draft. You're expecting them to play minutes and appear in games that season. And hopefully by their second year, they're at least at the worst an average player at said position. At 23rd overall in the hockey draft, you're hoping that player makes the team in 3 years. So, yeah.
Very different ideologies, yes.
Very different, which is exactly why, in my opinion, hockey is arguably the hardest sport to draft. And I'm not a baseball fan, but I think baseball is just as hard, if not harder.
Yeah, the one sport that came to my mind was baseball. Very unpredictable. But yeah, no, NHL is very hard to draft. There's a reason why you need so many scouts in so many different areas. So.
Yep. Well, that concludes the portion of the Rangers draft class, and on we move to our favorite part. Here we go with alphabetical team. I didn't even think of a good name for this section, but here we will go through almost every team alphabetically in all the moves that they've made so far since the trades leading up to the draft and the few days leading up to it. The draft day trades themselves that actually mattered outside of draft pick swaps and signings on the first day and a half of free agency. Or is it 2 days? No, it's not even a day and a half. It's at this particular point, it's a day and an hour and 14 minutes. So, yeah. All right. So let's start off with the Anaheim Ducks, who made two very minor free agent signings, if you want to go that way. The Anaheim Ducks signed Alex Killorn and Radko Gudas.
Directionless. That's what comes to my mind. Alex Killorn obviously was always going to cash out this offseason. He priced himself out with the Tampa Bay Lightning with how good he was in the postseason. But with that said, right, I just said it, Alex Killorn is going to get paid for what he does in the postseason. And he's not going to be able to play in the postseason with the Anaheim Ducks. So 4-year contract. I guess maybe, this is his long-term deal, gets another 3-year deal after that, closes out his career just from his perspective. And from Anaheim's perspective, I don't really get it. Maybe trying to put more butts in seats, but if you're trying to make the postseason, I don't think this really does it. Radko Gudas coming off of a pretty good run with the Florida Panthers going to Stanley Cup final. Again, thought that he would be a better fit for a contender, not a team like the Anaheim Ducks. So That's just where I'm at with it.
Yeah, just to state the cap hit, Alex Killorn, 4-year deal with an average annual value of 6.25 million. That, in my opinion, he's a good player, but he's not a 4-year, $6.25 million a year player, in my opinion. And Gudis, 3 years, 12 million for an average annual value of 4 million. I feel like this deal would have looked a lot better had he signed with a contender instead of a bottom dweller.
I don't hate the Gudis deal, but 6.25 million for Alex Killorn over 4 years. Yeah, I mean, I don't get it. I don't get it because there's going to come a time, right, when Anaheim's young players are producing, when your Leo Carlsons and your Mason McTavishes and your Trevor Zegras are all coming together and playing really well, and you're going to need that cap space to legitimately build your team. And this just seems like 2-0 moves and spending how much money? $10 million between two players just for the sake of spending $10 million.
Yeah, exactly. But I will admit, they did get 2 good players, but they still have a lot of work to do.
Yeah, not going to contend anytime soon, but again, maybe more people will be interested in the team. That's just it.
That's what they're hoping.
Mm-hmm. Add 2 veterans and, try to mentor the young guys. Maybe they're coming from that perspective too. So
exactly. And we move on to the Arizona Coyotes, the Yotes. They did make a select few moves. First and foremost, they traded a 2024 second-round pick in exchange for Sean Durzi from the LA Kings. I actually think that's a solid pickup for them. But again, they're a directionless team, and they're going nowhere anytime soon. I have to bring this up. They signed former Rangers legend Steven Camper. Thank you, Coyotes. They re-signed Connor Ingram, and they signed in free agency Troy Stecher, Jason Zucker, which I actually didn't even see until I checked Cap Friendly this morning, because that was one of the ones that got lost in the shuffle for me. Nick Bukestad, Alex Galchenyuk, I think that was a 2-way deal and not a 1-way deal, and Alex Kerfoot. So a little bit of a mixed bag, in my opinion.
I think Arizona's loading up. For what exactly? I don't know.
Yeah, loading up to sell at the deadline?
I guess. I mean, Zucker on a 1-year contract, no commitment. $6.5 million, I think, is what Zucker came in at. I think they're going to be able to get
5.3.
5.3. Okay,
yeah.
Even better. So Zucker had a $5.3 million cap hit, especially after the year he had in Pittsburgh, which was pretty good. I think they'll be able to get a pretty good return for him. Nick Bukestad spent some time in the bottom 6 for Arizona last year, played really well. Galchenyuk comes back. Okay. Troy Stecher, I thought, was pretty good with Vancouver and Detroit. So again, he's in addition to that back end alongside Sean Durzi. Really looks like Arizona's trying to rebuild the defense, which is a good idea, something they need to do. And Kerfoot, I guess, 2-year contract, just from the player's perspective, trying to rebuild his value, on a team where he can maybe slip into the top 6.
Yeah, Kerfoot, a 2-year deal, average annual value of 3.5 mil. Nick Bukestad, 2-year deal as well with a cap hit of 2.1 million. So not awful contracts. It's just it's the Coyotes.
Yep, pretty much.
And Sean Durzi has 1 year left before he goes to restricted free agency. He's got 24-year-old defenseman, $1.7 million cap hit. Whether or not they choose to re-sign him or shop him is going to be interesting to see. But in the meantime, solid pickup.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, just to keep mentioning the cap hits, Troy Stecher, 1.1 million for 1 more year. And off we go. So the Boston Bruins have had a interesting couple days. So they traded away Taylor Hall and Nick Foligno for Ian Mitchell and Alex Regula to the Chicago Blackhawks. They bought out Mike Riley, and they have signed James Van Riemsdyk, Milan Lucic, who looks like this is going to be his last contract, Patrick Brown, Morgan Geekie, and Rangers legend Kevin Shattenkirk.
Again, trading Taylor Hall was something I think they had to do in regard to their cap. But I don't know about you, Shades, but when they traded Taylor Hall for pretty much nothing and Foligno as well, I thought that it was going to be the Bruins signing Tyler Bertuzzi. But it was not. Instead, it was a bunch of one-year deals, and we'll see, what is to come. But signing Morgan Geekie, what's his AAV? $2.5 million. I like Geekie as a player. Too flat. Okay.
For 2 years.
For 2 years. I like Geekie. He did some really good work in Seattle, don't get me wrong. But does he really move the needle and make the Bruins a better team than they were with players like Foligno and Hall? I'm not sure. Van Riemsdyk, I think that's going to be a good addition for them. Lucic comes back on a one-year deal. That's a PR contract. Shattenkirk played pretty well in Anaheim, so we'll see what he has in store. But again, he's on the last couple years of his career. And Connor Brown, correct? Also? Patrick Brown. Also coming there, another depth forward. So for the Bruins, marginal moves. We'll see what else is in store. I don't really think this is it. And the big question mark is what's the status of Patrice Bergeron and David Krejci? Are they going to retire or not? Maybe that's what they're holding their cap for.
Maybe from what it looked like at the end of the Panthers series, though, it did look like Bergeron was done.
It did. I agree.
And just to as always, because I'm going to do this throughout the whole episode, the cap hits for each player, Lucic and JVR, $1 million each for a year. Patrick Brown, 2 years, $800,000 a year. And Kevin Shattenkirk, 1 year, $1.05 million. So there's been a lot of cheap deals this offseason. A lot of cheap ones. Ton of cheap deals. But yeah, these are just moves to me that are filling out a roster. So because they needed to they had to dump some guys for salary cap reasons, and the roster fill outs. That's all I get out of these deals.
I agree.
Moving on quickly to gloss over the Sabres. They signed Eric Johnson, who was let go by Colorado via free agency. They signed Tyson Jost, and they signed Connor Clifton. Not really needle moving moves at all. Johnson is a defensive veteran. Jost is a young forward who is hoping that a change of scenery will do him some good. And Connor Clifton is a decent depth forward.
Yeah. Again, I like the moves that they made. Not really much to say about him. I think Tyson Jost, again, had a very interesting career trajectory. Played in Buffalo for parts of last year, 22 points in 59 games. I believe he got bought out by the Colorado Avalanche, signed with Minnesota. So again, he's been around the block a little bit. Clifton, I like a lot. I think he's going to be a good defenseman for them. 23 points in 78 games. 3-year, $10 million deal. Say what you want, but he's been pretty stable on the back end for Boston over the last couple of years. But again, not really much to say about these signings. I expect something more to come in the next few weeks. But for day one of free agency, Buffalo probably stayed the most quiet of any other team.
Yeah, they were pretty quiet. So Eric Johnson, 1 year, $3.25 million. Tyson Jost is 1 year, $2 million flat. And Connor Clifton is the hell happened to his deal? Oh, there it is. 3 years, $10 million for 3.33333333. And because it's 10 million flat, you pick whatever year you want to add the 4 at the end. You gotta love math.
Don't miss it.
No, neither do I. Moving on to the Calgary Flames, where they had a pretty interesting move. They traded Tyler Toffoli to New Jersey for Igor Sharangovich and a 2023 third-round pick, and they extended Sharangovich after the trade. Calgary needed to make some moves, and they're hoping that Sharangovich develops into what Toffoli brought to the team. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think the New Jersey Devils picked up probably the best forward on the trade market. They gave up Igor Sharangovich, who was pretty good in the top 9 for the Devils. His kind of offensive production kind of tailed off a little bit towards the end of the year, especially in the playoffs. But as much as I hate to say it, Tom Fitzgerald going out and sending Sharon Govich in a third and getting back Tyler Toffoli, who's under $5 million at his cap hit right now, and re-signing Jesper Bratt and Timo Meyer, it's danger. Danger. Ranger danger.
Good moves for them, but Calgary is, I don't even know what they're trying to do anymore.
I like Sharon Govich, but
That's
does a
the one.
third-round pick really move the needle enough? I think if they had waited a little bit longer, especially closer to the draft, I think that they could have gotten a little bit more. But
maybe. But I mean, Calgary, they need to. I don't even know what they need to do. That organization is just in freaking shambles right now after how this last year went for them.
yeah, they're in a tough spot.
They're in a very tough spot, but it's going to be interesting to see how they pull themselves out of that one. And on to the Carolina Hurricanes. They actually made some pretty intriguing moves, which I, as a hockey fan in general, I'm kind of a fan of, to be perfectly honest with you. So they ended up extending Jordan Staal, Jesper Fast, and Antti Ranta, which I all thought those were three very good guys to bring back. And they signed Dmitry Orlov, Michael Bunting, and they re-signed they signed with an asterisk, re-signed Freddie Anderson because he did technically hit unrestricted free agency before they re-signed him. Good moves by them. I can't really hate on that.
Yeah, I'm with you. Good moves on all of them. But the one thing that didn't really make sense to me is that they bring back Ranta and Anderson. What does this mean for Kochetkov? I mean, it's, Kochetkov wins the Calder Cup, right, with the Chicago Wolves 2 years ago and was really terrific in his short stints in the NHL, struggled against the Rangers in the playoffs, say what you will, in the latter part of that series 2 years ago where Carolina lost a series that they probably shouldn't have. But I just don't know. I just don't know if sticking with a veteran in Ranta over your young goaltender that clearly deserves a chance in the NHL just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But the moves they made on the forward group and on the back end, I like.
Yeah, no, I actually really like the Orlov and Michael Bunting signings in particular. Orlov was one of those guys I thought for sure was going to get a 5 or 6 year contract. But the fact that Carolina was able to get him at 2 years, it's a high cap hit of 7.75, but 2 years, that's extremely manageable for a guy who is coming off a very good season. Let's be honest here. And then Michael Bunting, as soon as I saw Carolina signed him, I was like, shit. Because him on that team is going to be a problem in a good way for them, in a bad way for everybody else.
It's not going to be fun for the Rangers, that's for sure.
No.
But I agree with you on the Orlov contract. High cap hit, 2 years, low risk. Look, the thing with Bunting is he played on Austin Matthews' wing. Just saying, that's always going to be the argument with Bunting. How is it going to translate, right, going from a high-powered offense in Toronto to one, in Carolina that's definitely more conservative than a lot of the other teams, especially in the Eastern Conference. So it's going to be a very interesting dynamic. I think that going along with what you said, the way that Bunting plays is going to help the Hurricanes. I just don't know if statistically his production is going to match his cap hit. But the Carolina Hurricanes got better. And you know what, Shades? What's most interesting about Carolina and the entire discussion around them is that they're not done. And that Erik Karlsson is still heavily on their radar. And they could bring in Erik Karlsson to a back end that has Jacob Slavin, Brett Pesce, all these guys that you just mentioned.
Orlov, Brent
Dmitry Orlov, Brent Burns. It's a stacked group over there. So something's going to have to give. And I'm very interested in to see the Hurricanes' future and what their direction is going to be because they're going all in right here. They don't want to waste any more time. These playoff exits in the last couple of years that may or not have been premature, I think are really getting to them in their front office. So a couple huge moves by the Hurricanes. Definitely one of the bigger teams in the Metropolitan activity-wise. Yes,
100%. The Bunting contract is a little bit of a question mark, though. 3 years with a 4.5 mil AAV.
It's risky. It's risky.
Oh, yeah. 100%. And you brought up an extremely valid point earlier about him.
Yeah, and there is no Austin Matthews in Carolina. Okay. I talked about the play style and how it changes from under Sheldon Keefe to now under Rod Brindamore. But Sebastian Aho is the number one center, but there's no guarantee that Michael Bunting's going to be playing there. Just saying, so it's definitely risky. If I was going to go a high AAV for a player like Michael Bunting, I'd want the term to be down. And you said 4 year shades, right?
For Jordan Staal, yeah.
No, for Bunting.
Yeah, 3 years.
3 years, okay. 3 years is a little bit long for me. But for Jordan Staal, they bring back their captain. That's a move they had to make. And he's still a really effective two-way shutdown center. So I don't care if you're 38, 39, 40 years old. If you still have effective shutdown center in your repertoire, it's a good player to add. And
Yeah,
keep on
Jordan Staal, 34 years old, signed a 4-year contract with an average annual value of $2.9 million. That's actually a extremely good value contract for the Hurricanes. I'm actually kind of jealous. Jesper Fast coming back 2 years, $2.4 million a year. Again, solid depth player, can play top 6 minutes if he needs to. Good cap hit for a player that plays with some grit.
That's a move they had to make. Again, These are players that you have to bring back if you want to continue and elevate your chances of potentially winning a Stanley Cup. And I think Carolina has done that. And I think they're in a really good position going into next year. And early projections here, they're at the top of my list, second day into the offseason. So we'll see. They definitely checked every box they needed to, especially in the first couple of days.
Yeah, just to finish it off with the 2 goalie cap hits. Freddie Anderson, I was shocked they re-signed him this cheap. 2 years, $3.4 million AAV. That's great value for Anderson. I have a bias towards Anderson, I guess, because I'm a lot higher on him than I would say most fans around the league, because I've seen what he can do firsthand. I've seen him play. He's an underrated goalie, and even when the Leafs signed him a couple years back to that 5-year contract, that was good value contract for them back then. And Antti Raanta, 1 year, 1.5 mil. Again, 1 and 2 punch, starting goaltender tandem, even though Ranta's clearly the backup there. 4.9 total cap hit, 4.9 million. That's pretty good.
It is pretty good. And, there's never been an issue for me and Freddie Anderson, just talent-wise. I'm right on the same wavelength as you. I think he's a tremendous goalie, one of the best goalies we've seen in the past decade. He's been around for quite a while now. For me, it's always been the health. And I think that's why Freddie Anderson's cap hit is where it's at. I think he'd be getting paid a lot more if he'd be able to stay on the ice and be healthy. But for his entire tenure in Carolina thus far, what has it been, 2-3 years? He hasn't been healthy for an entire playoff run. Antti Raanta has had to come in and save his behind. And that's why Raanta got re-signed too, and maybe why they, are so infatuated with the tandem of Raanta and Anderson, because when push has come to shove, if one has gone down and the other has needed to step up, that's happened for them. The reason why they've gotten, eliminated from the playoffs these last few years, I could tell you, it hasn't been because of goaltending. Raanta and Anderson have been terrific. And when, like I said before, when Kochetkov had his name called, he was pretty good as well. So again, it's all about health with these two guys. If they can stay healthy, I like the move. But for right now, if I was in the general manager's chair of the Carolina Hurricanes, I would have given Kochetkov a chance. But that's just me.
Yeah, and there was a good amount of discussion that needed to be talked about with the Hurricanes. So, and we did just that.
For sure.
The Chicago Blackhawks, on the other hand, are in a significantly different position than the Hurricanes. Obviously, they draft Connor Bedard. They have to they accept Taylor Hall and Nick Foligno via cap dump from Boston. 2 good pickups by them. They also would go on to acquire a 2026 second round pick from the New York Islanders to take on Josh Bailey's contract, who they would then buy out. They signed Ryan Donato in free agency. I need to double check the cap hit on that one, but they would also go on to extend Nick Foligno before he would hit unrestricted free agency from the trade. They would go on to trade a 2024 7th round pick for Corey Perry, and they would give him a contract before he would hit unrestricted free agency. And they signed Andreas Athanasiou to a 2-year deal. So there was some, they were busy, the Blackhawks.
It's not like they're trying to tank, right? They were certainly busy. They signed Donato. That was 2 years, 2 million AAV, so $4 million total. I've been a big fan of Donato ever since he entered the league.
Yes, you have.
With Minnesota and San Jose, and has spent time with Boston as well. Played with Seattle, actually. Fun fact, scored the first ever goal in Kraken history. Again, like you said, not necessarily directionless like the other teams like Anaheim that we were talking about, but Chicago has a little bit more of a direction now that they have a franchise player in Connor Bedard, and I guess the goal is just to surround him with as much talent as possible. And I don't think it's the worst thing for number 98 to, have Taylor Hall on his left wing to start his NHL career. So although they're not going to make the playoffs, they're not going to come anywhere close. I still think it's going to be an exciting year for Blackhawks fans. And Kyle Davidson, the new general manager, I think that he kind of geared the offseason towards that. Look, no expectations, not going to make the playoffs, but it's still going to be a fun, exciting year. And let's bring in players that help facilitate that.
Yeah, Taylor Hall, his contract was 2 years, $6 million a year. Athanasiou, 2 years, $4.25 million a year. Foligno and Corey Perry both got a year at $4 million. They still have, I think, $18 million in cap space. According to Cap Friendly, there's only 4 defensemen on the roster. Yeah, that's how it's looking. And they still need a goalie. So all of these signings, specifically the Foligno and Perry ones, just scream, yeah, we want to make sure we're not in danger of going below the cap floor.
Yeah, that too.
Yeah.
That too. Especially the 2 trades. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And they also just scream, okay, we'll hold back 50% at the deadline to hopefully get some draft picks. Because they do, like you said, they do seem to have more of a direction than the Ducks, but they still have a very long way to go.
Yes, they do.
On to the Colorado Avalanche, where this is where it gets interesting, because Colorado has made a number of moves, and I don't exactly know what they're doing, but maybe I'll have a better picture after we talk about it right now. So I would just like to say, even though this was a very minor move, the Avalanche acquired Frederick Olofsson from the Dallas Stars. May we take a moment of silence to acknowledge the future considerations? Thank you. They also acquired Ryan Johansson at a 50% cap retention, aka $4 million, from Nashville in exchange for Alex Galchenyuk, who we will get back to him, but Galchenyuk ended up signing a 2-way deal. So that is a complete cap dump from Nashville of $4 million. And before I get to the trade they made, the 2 big trades they made, in free agency, they would sign Miles Wood, Jonathan Drouin. They brought back Bowen Byram, and they also brought back Andrew Cogliano.
Okay.
And in terms of the 2 big trades that I mentioned, apart from the Ryan Johansson trade, they would acquire Ross Colton from the Tampa Bay Lightning in exchange for a 2023 second. That is a very, very good pickup, possibly even an underrated pickup by the Avalanche, because how did they win the Cup 2 years ago? They had players like Ross Colton filled throughout their lineup. Good player for them to bring in. And they traded Alex Newhook to the Montreal Canadiens in exchange for Gianni Fairbrother, great name, a 2023 first-round pick, which I think ended up becoming Mikhail Gulyayev, and a second-round pick in 2023. So they've made some moves, and I got to say, I kind of like them.
Yeah, I like one move. I don't like the other move. For me, as far as the free agent signings are concerned, Wood signing a 6-year deal, I don't know.
Yeah, that was questionable, definitely.
It's just a term for me, right? I mean, I see what they're trying to do. Joe Sakic trying, again, find lightning in a bottle with a bottom 6 player, have him with a solid average annual value, which he probably got with Miles Wood, although I don't know it off the top of my head. But he signed him for 6 years. I assume the money was pretty decent. Jonathan Drouin,
$2.5 million a year.
Oof. That's a little high.
Yeah.
That's a little high, especially we spoke about it earlier, right? With the bargain contracts given out to see a player like Miles Wood, who failed to crack the Devils lineup in the playoffs, especially in that series against the Rangers. If you look back specifically, to get $2.5 million a season for 6 years, I like him as a player. The production and the consistency just hasn't been there. You talked about the trades. Alex Newhook, I really like. I wasn't a fan of giving him up, to be honest. Again, two late first round picks, or one late first round pick, one second round pick.
Yeah, one early second.
Yeah, so I like Newhook as a prospect. I remember when the Rangers were shopping around Chris Kreider and potential prospects coming back. I looked at Alex Newhook, and the Colorado Avalanche had him untouchable, and he had the tough year last year in Montreal. Picks up a pretty good player that's going to be a decent centerman in the NHL for years to come. So I like him. They signed Bowen Byram to a 2-year deal. Jonathan Drouin, I'm a little bit iffy on. Of course, he played with Nathan McKinnon in juniors all those years back, but Drouin is not the same player. He's a defensive liability. So again, risky moves by the Avalanche. We'll see if it works out for them. But for me, I circled the 6-year deal to Miles Wood, and I'm not too much of a fan.
Yeah, they still have yet to give Ross Colton a contract, but he's a restricted free agent who does have arbitration rights. So we'll see what happens with that.
And I like
Byram,
Colton as well. I'm a fan of the pickup. And again, that's just taking advantage of Tampa Bay, who had no cap flexibility. So
exactly.
Good on that.
So fun fact, according to Cap Friendly, with 10 forwards on the roster, 7 defensemen on the roster, and 2 goalies, the Avalanche are technically over the cap by $200,000. So they're not done making moves. I don't believe that for 1 second. Bowen Byram, 2 years, $3.85 million. Miles Wood, we said 6 years, $2.5 million a year. Jonathan Drouin, his contract was 1 year, $825,000. Like you said, hoping to strike lightning in a bottle. Andrew Cogliano also got 1 year, $825,000. So they're trying to, like I said, they're not done making moves, but they're trying to capture lightning in a bottle with a couple players.
So. They are.
Onto the Blue Jackets. They really didn't do much. They extended a bunch of restricted free agents and signed Adam Fantilli, who dropped to them at number 3 in the draft, to his ELC, and they gave Matthew Oliver an extension, who is literally the only player of note that they signed, and they gave him a 2-year, $1.1 million a year deal, moving on to the Dallas Stars, unless you have team that you would like to touch upon before that.
We can go for the Stars.
And I clicked on the wrong team on Cap Friendly. All good. So the Dallas Stars ended up, like we said, rest in peace, future considerations for Frederick Olofsson. They traded for Colin Miller. They gave up a 2025 5th-round pick to New Jersey for defenseman Colin Miller. Decent pickup for them. I actually think that's going to fly under the radar a little bit, if it didn't already. They extended Evgeny Dadonov to a $2,250,000 a year deal for 2 years. And they also signed Joel Hanley, Craig Smith, Matt Duchene, and Sam Steele. So I would say little bit of a mixed bag there, to kind of be fair. Before I throw it to you, let me get the cap hits out there. Joel Hanley ended up signing a 2 year, $787,500 a year deal. Craig Smith went on to sign for a 1 year, $1 million deal, another cheap contract. Matt Duchene ended up signing a 1 year, $3 million deal, which I thought he would get a little bit more than that, but I digress. And Sam Steele, that's a depth player, 1 year, $850,000, 25 years old. They're hoping a change of scenery can be beneficial to him. What do you have to say about the Stars?
Yeah, not too much to say about Dallas. Again, Sam Steele, change of scenery. That's what they're looking for. Again, had high upside with Anaheim all those years back, but just has never been able to put it together. Matt Duchene gets bought out by Nashville. He instantly becomes the number 1 free agent on the market. He gets 1 year, $3 million. Again, I thought that was a little bit low, like you said, but I think sometimes when a player gets bought out, it's the situation, not necessarily the money. And I think Matt Duchene potentially wanted to play in Dallas and thinks he could be that last piece, for a Stanley Cup winning team. And, as mediocre as sometimes I portray Dallas to be roster-wise, they've been really impressive the last couple of years. And you could argue that they are a Matt Duchene away from winning the Stanley Cup. So we'll see if that moves the needle for them. So I don't hate the moves, but like you said, a little bit of a mixed bag.
Yeah, Dallas made the conference final last year, so I could definitely see them being back in that position again next year.
They did. Yes, they did.
The Detroit Red Wings. So they acquired Kyler Yamamoto and Klim Kostin from the Oilers in exchange for, rest in peace, future considerations. They would end up they ended up buying out Kyler Yamamoto, which I thought was very surprising. They ended up extending Klim Kostin after the trade to a 2-year, $2 million a year deal. And they made this is another mixed bag of free agency signings. So they signed James Reimer, who I'm a fan of, to a 1-year, $1.5 million deal. Backup goalie, nothing wrong with that. Decent backup. They overpaid Justin Hall, 3 years, $3.4 million a year. Yeesh. They brought back Alex Lyon, 2 years, $900,000, who played pretty well for them when he needed to last year. JT Compher was a solid pickup for them. 5 years, $5.1 million a year. Shane Gostisbehere ended up signing a 1-year, $4.125 million a year deal. Again, under the right circumstances, Gostisbehere is a capable defenseman who can bring something to the team. Detroit just may not be that team, and they ended up signing Christian Fischer to a 1-year, $1.125 million a year deal. So, yeah, again, a little bit of a mixed bag.
Yeah, again, not too much to talk about really with Detroit. I think they made a lot of moves. Of course, the big one is Compher signing the 5-year contract. He had a really good year in Colorado, has been really underrated for a long time. And again, I think Yzerman's been looking for depth up front, and I think he gets that in JT Compher. Gostisbehere, I like that as well. Doesn't really help on the defensive side of the puck, but he's as good of an offensive defenseman as there is value-wise for what he got on the market. Justin Hall, again, was highly scrutinized in Toronto, but I think his underlying numbers were pretty good. They signed Reimer for goaltending depth. Again, not really too much to say, but again, this is an Yzerman offseason, pretty typical.
Yep. And let's see if the Red Wings can take a step this year that they were not able to last year. So time will tell on that one. The Edmonton Oilers, well, we've already touched upon the Kyler Yamamoto and Klim Kostin cap dump to Detroit. Their other moves, they would extend. I think I just lost Liam there for a second. They would go on to extend Derek Ryan and Matthias Janmark. Derek Ryan would end up signing a 2-year deal with an average annual value of $900,000. That is just purely a depth move. And Liam's computer died, so I'm gonna just carry this for a second. Derek Ryan, like I said, the 2-year deal. Matthias Janmark would go on to sign a 1-year deal worth $1 million. So hoping capable bottom 6 forward. And in free agency, they would sign Lane Peterson, who is a center, 25 years old. I'm pretty sure he was a free agent. Could be wrong, though. 2 years, $775,000 a year. Depth move. They would go on to give Drake Caggiula his contract is nowhere to be found here. What the hell happened there? I think that might have been a 2-year deal, but he would end up signing nope, can't find his contract. All right, moving on to Connor Brown. He would go up to sign a 1-year deal worth $775,000. That is a decent depth move. Connor Brown has been a little inconsistent throughout the years, but in the right situation, he can be a capable forward that can bring something to the team. Not too much of a needle mover, but under the right circumstances, he will can have a good season. And I'm gonna wait for Liam to come back, so do not mind this jump cut. Yeah, so Liam, while you were gone, I basically just listed that the Oilers made the trade with the Red Wings. They extended Derek Ryan and Matthias Janmark, and they signed Lane Peterson and Connor Brown and gave Drake Caggiula a 2-way contract. Your thoughts?
Well, apologies for my brief hiatus, but I think there could be worse teams to drop out of the meeting for the Oilers because they were pretty quiet, at least in day one of free agency. Again, Drake Caggiula, that's a player that has had history with the Edmonton Oilers. And a couple other depth forwards. So not really much to talk about with Edmonton. It's the same story every year, defense and goaltending. So.
Yeah. And like I said earlier, the cap dumps with Kostin and Yamamoto, and they were pretty quiet team.
Wasn't a fan of the cap dump of Yamamoto, to be honest.
No, neither was I.
And I bet Edmonton is kind of ruining their decision because, Detroit would go on to just
buy him out.
waive him, buy him out anyway. So now Edmonton can't have access to the player. Detroit doesn't have access to the player. So Yamamoto is a pretty decent young forward who could get signed to an affordable cap hit. So we'll see if that decision is one Ken Holland regrets.
Yep. The Florida Panthers have been a interesting team this offseason. So they ended up trading Anthony Duclair to San Jose for Steven Lorentz and a 2025 fifth-round draft pick. That just screams, yep, we're too close to the cap. We need to get rid of literally anybody that we're going to have to give somewhat of a contract to, right? I cannot hear you.
It's the once a episode I'm muted.
Just like my camera going out of focus.
yeah. The technical problems are endless for this episode.
Especially today. Yeah, seriously.
But the Panthers are an interesting team, right? And the first move that you listed off, Shades, was that they trade Anthony Duclair to the San Jose Sharks and get a draft pick and Steven Lorentz back. And Lorentz is not a bad depth forward by any means, but Anthony Duclair was a staple of that top six for the Panthers and was a big reason why they've had the turnaround over the last couple of years that they've had. So very interested to see how his, not being with the Panthers anymore is going to affect the team's play. They signed Rangers legend Niko Mikkola to a 3-year contract. Again, we know what Mikkola can do. He's probably the replacement for Ratko Gudas on the back end, right, who signed elsewhere with the Anaheim Ducks. Kevin Stenlund, decent player. Evan Rodriguez, a 4-year contract. Rodriguez played really well in Pittsburgh, got a payday in Colorado, and was a big reason why the Avalanche won the Stanley Cup the year after he was signed. So a 4-year contract, always a risk. But I like that move to supplement the loss of Anthony Duclair. So it was a back and forth offseason thus far for Florida. But Shades, here's where I'll end my talk on the Panthers. They're one of the teams in on Erik Karlsson. So if they're able to snag number 65, that kind of changes the entire outlook for Florida moving forward. So,
yeah, the Kevin Stenlund deal is 1 year, $1 million. Again, another one of those. They signed Mike Riley also 1 year, $1 million. Yet another one. Dmitry Kulikov also signed 1 year, $1 million. I swear, if I see one more 1 year, $1 million deal, I'm gonna fucking lose it. Niko Mikkola, as we mentioned, got a 3-year deal, $2.5 million a year. Good for him. That's a solid pickup and a solid value deal for both the player and the team. Evan Rodriguez, like you said, 4-year deal, $3 million. Good value for him. They signed Anthony Stolarz to be a backup goaltender, 1 year, $1.1 million a year. Close. They signed Grigory Denisenko to that might have been a two-way contract. So I'm going to skip over that. And how did we miss this? Oliver Ekman-Larsson, 1 year, $2.25 million a year deal. Questionable signing for them. But yeah, that happened.
The only good thing about the Ekman-Larsson signing was that it was 1 year.
I'm going to end Florida's discussion on that.
Yep.
The Los Angeles Kings have had a pretty yikes couple of days, just my honest opinion. We touched upon the Sean Durzi trade earlier, which was they gave up him for a 2nd-round pick to Arizona. And then the Pierre-Luc Dubois trade happened. And as soon as I saw that, I said, that is an L for the Kings. And then as soon as I saw the contract, I was like, I tweeted out, holy overpay. So just to recap the trade quickly, the Los Angeles Kings acquire Pierre-Luc Dubois. In exchange, the Winnipeg Jets acquire Gabriel Velarde, Alex Iafallo, Rasmus Kupari, and a 2024 2nd-round pick. The Jets fleeced the Kings on this deal, in my opinion. What are your thoughts?
It's an interesting trade. I will say this, and this is where I'll disagree with you. I think that the Los Angeles Kings got the best player in the trade. with Pierre-Luc Dubois. I don't like his attitude. I don't like the way that he approaches his shifts sometimes. Of course, going back to that infamous shift with Columbus,
Yep.
where he put in a noticeable lack of effort. Things didn't really translate all that well after he went to the Winnipeg Jets. Winnipeg wanted to really sever the relationship. They wanted to go their separate ways. There really was no interest of continuing things. So him getting traded was inevitable. But I think the Los Angeles Kings are a team that really have solid depth down the middle now. They trade away Iafallo, and they, might not have the depth that they once had. But you're rolling out Kopitar, Dubois, and Quinton Byfield, 1, 2, 3, whichever order you want to put them in down the middle. That's pretty dangerous, and I like that for them. As far as their other signings, Cam Talbot, a 1-year contract, low-risk deal. I like Talbot. He didn't really get his chance to really take the number 1 spot in Ottawa last year. And Trevor Lewis, 1-year contract. I love Trevor Lewis. He's one of my favorite players in the league. Again, not really a lot of moves that move the needle too much, but at least it didn't sign Jonas Korpisalo for the contract that the team that signed him did. So, although I'll leave that for later.
Yeah, we'll get back to that. Trevor Lewis, 1 year, $775,000, which, if that is not league minimum, that is extremely close. Is league minimum 750 or 775 now?
I believe league minimum is 750.
All right, so he near league minimum. Talbot gets 1 year, 1 million, yet another one. And I believe they also signed David Rittich, 1 year, 875,000. I believe so. I could be wrong, but yeah, apart from that trade, just in general, I think the Kings got worse this offseason. That's just me. Moving on to the Montreal Canadiens, we touched upon the new Hook trade with Colorado earlier. We talked about how much they gave up for him. I think that's a solid player to bring in for them. And they also acquired Joel Edmondson from Washington in exchange for 2024 third and 7th round picks. Decent depth player, Joel Edmondson is. I don't exactly know where the Canadiens plan to go this season, but it's looking extremely obvious that it's a very slow build. Your thoughts?
Yeah, again, not too much to talk about with the Montreal Canadiens, right? Outside of the new Hook trade, I think they did really well in that deal. And again, besides that, they lose Alex Belzile to the Rangers. Drouin, of course, goes to the Colorado Avalanche. I think there's more to come with Montreal's offseason, but I think their direction is staying at the lower part of the league, again, accumulating draft capital, and really developing young players. I don't think there's any rush for Montreal to jump right back into the playoffs. And I think this, initial days of free agency is kind of indicating that that's the direction that they're heading in.
Yep. Onto the Nashville Predators. They made it's honestly been pretty quiet for them. They made a bunch of draft day pick swaps. We touched upon the Ryan Johansson trade earlier. They would end up buying out Matt Duchene the final year of his contract, which we touched upon him earlier, but the dead cap hit is as follows: 6 years worth of dead cap, the worst 2 years being 24-25 and 25-26, with basically 5 and 6.5 respectively. Other than that, it's the other 4 years are not too bad, but Nashville is I still like what they're doing. They still have a ton of draft picks next year in 2024. Between the 2nd and 4th round, they have 8 picks. So I see them making some moves. They also signed in free agency, which I thought was a great pickup for them, Ryan O'Reilly, 4 years, $4.5 million a year. I think that is a great move from them. Very good center, gonna bring a lot to that locker room. They made a major emphasis on culture this offseason, and that's a wonderful guy to bring in. What else did they do? I don't think they did much after that.
Well, talk about making bold moves right out of the gate, right? Barry Trotz certainly did that. He buys out Ryan Johansson. He buys out Matt Duchene, 2 of the highest priced contracts on the team at the time. Like you said, I think that there was a clear indication that there needed to be a culture change. Ryan O'Reilly comes in, and you can't bring in a better locker room presence than Ryan O'Reilly. And again, I think I agree with you. It's a team that, is young, but they want to continue to stay competitive through that retool. So, they bring in Gustav Nyquist, they bring in Luke Shen, and those are two players on the back end and up front, respectively, that are going to help mentor these young players and push them in the right direction going forth in their NHL career. So at this point for Nashville, playoffs would be nice. I don't think that's the expectation. And Barry Trotz is kind of building for 3 to 5 years from now when Nashville's really going to make an impact.
Yeah, Gustav Nyquist ended up getting a 2-year deal with a cap hit of 3.185. Cody Glass signed 2 years, $2.5 million a year deal. He's a player that's kind of been up and down, hasn't really gotten his consistency in the league, but I digress. But good pickups for Nashville, and they're still building. That's really all I can say.
Yep, agreed.
Moving on to the New Jersey Devils, who have made a couple moves. So they traded Mackenzie Blackwood to the San Jose Sharks in exchange for a 2023 6th-round pick. We touched upon the Toffoli trade earlier, but I feel like we need to bring it up again. Again, a solid addition, and they have a very good top 6 forward group now. Yeah, Timo Meier, Jack Hughes, Jesper Bratt, Nico Hischier, Andre Palat, and now Tyler Toffoli with some decent bottom 6 guys too, with the defense core that's coming together. The Colin Miller, they traded him for 1 year, 1.85. Good moves by Jersey. They're just hoping to build on last season.
Yeah, I think their top 6 is as good as any other team in the Eastern Conference after what they acquired. I mean, If you told me that they would not only bring in Toffoli, but re-sign both Bratt and Meyer to respectable deals, that's a win of an offseason for Tom Fitzgerald. You talked about shoring up the back end a little bit as well. They do that in bringing in Colin Miller. Dougie Hamilton is really emerging as a number 1 defenseman. That's what they need. Goaltending is a little bit of a question mark for me now that Mackenzie Blackwood is no longer with the team, but it looks like from the Devils' upper management, they're comfortable with rolling out Akira Schmid out there as the number 1 guy going into next season alongside Vitek Vanacek. So that's my only concern when it comes to the Devils. But when you look at their forward group and their defense core, it's hard to overlook that. You got to ask yourself, if they had Tyler Toffoli in the 2nd round against the Carolina Hurricanes, do things go differently? And I say they might. So, again, very, very interesting offseason. And I think they're the winners for now. But we'll get to that later in the episode.
100%. And we move on to the New York Islanders, who did absolutely nothing besides re-sign a bunch of guys. They re-signed Ilya Sorokin, 8 years, $8.25 million a year. Pierre Engvall got a 7-year contract with $3 million a year. I mean, I understand they needed to bring him back, but for 7 years, I don't know about that. Semyon Varlamov, 4 years, $2.75 million cap hit, which I was actually kind of surprised they signed him to a 4-year contract after that Sorokin deal. And Scott Mayfield, 7 years, $3.5 million. So Lou Lamoriello doing what he does best, a whole lot of nothing.
Yep, for right now, a whole lot of nothing. There is a report that they're interested in Alex DeBrincat, but again, how many times over the last 5 years have we seen the Islanders swing and miss at top goal scorers, whether that's on the market or whether that's on the trade market, right? Yep. So, I'm not holding my breath for that. As far as their extensions, I got to be honest, Shades, I was pretty stunned when I saw that they re-upped Engvall to 7 years. Yep. Engvall was pretty good as an Islander, but really a bottom 6 guy that his placement in the NHL is, you never really know with those type of guys, right? So 7 years at the cap hit that they got him at, I mean, I'm a little bit worried if I'm an Islander fan. Scott Mayfield, a little bit better of a 7-year contract, although still not great. Mayfield has been pretty good, especially on the defensive side of the puck for the Islanders. Sorokin, an 8-year contract. It had to happen, right? Yeah. That's a slam dunk of a deal. And like you said, I concur. I was pretty surprised that they signed Varlamov to 4 years. That was a little bit long for me. 1 year would have made sense, but I think they could have allocated their finances a little bit better, going for a cheaper goaltender, to back up Ilya Sorokin and bring in maybe some much needed help on the top line.
Yeah. But Islanders did a whole lot of nothing, and my Islander friends are not happy, which makes me happy. So, yeah. moving on to our beloved New York Rangers. Chris Drury was just signing everybody yesterday, seemingly. So the day started off with Blake Wheeler, his contract being announced, and then the cap hit came in, and I was just like, holy crap, I absolutely love this signing. Blake Wheeler, 1 year, $800,000 cap hit. And I was just like, that is a win by Drury. And I have been very critical of Drury, but I really like Blake Wheeler as a player. And at that cap hit, that is going to be an absolute steal. They're hoping he could slot in the top six. Nick Bonino was also announced, 1 year, $800,000, depth forward. I would love the signing if this was 4 or 5 years ago compared to the Nick Bonino now. Eric Gustafson, 1 year, $825,000, power play guy, another offensive guy on the back end, decent. I actually really like the pickup because he's a guy who's capable of putting up 30, 40 points. Tyler Pitlick, 1 year, $787,500. Not huge on Pitlick. Haven't really been huge on him since he came into the league with Edmonton. Riley Nash, 2 years, $775,000 a year. Face-off depth guy. Decent signing, in my opinion. They brought back Zach Jones on a 2-year deal, who is going to compete for the third pair left defenseman spot, 2 years, $812,500 a year. And the last signing of note, Jonathan Quick, 1 year, $825,000. You and I disagreed a little bit on this in the group chat, but I personally hated this signing because I think Quick is more than washed. He showed that the last couple seasons. So as everyone kind of caught on as I was going through that, little bit of a mixed bag with more positive than negative, in my opinion.
Yeah, Shades, for me, Blake Wheeler, 1 year contract. I agree with you. He can slot into that top six. He's not the player that he once was. He was the captain of the Winnipeg Jets, and of note, he was stripped of that captaincy while he was still on the team. Just want to put that out there. Don't want any locker room issues, but from what he brings on the ice, I think he's going to be a great addition. I'll get to Quick last since we had a little bit of a disagreement there. Belzile, 2-year contract with the Rangers. Is he probably going to play in Hartford? Yes, but was he really good on that fourth line for Montreal? Also, yes. Tyler Pitlick, I disagree with you on Pitlick, to be honest. I mean, he's 31. Has he reached his ceiling kind of in the NHL? Sure. But is he a really hard worker in the bottom six that the Rangers are going to need come playoff time? Also, yes. So I think a 1-year contract, not a lot of risk. Riley Nash, face-off guy, like you said, reminds me of like a Dominic Moore. Rangers haven't really had that, somebody who can just come in, slot in on that fourth line and just help gain possession of the puck when you need it. Nick Bonino, provides much of the same thing Riley Nash does. I agree with you. I would love the signing if it was 3-4 years ago. But in 2023, I'm a little bit 50-50 on it. Gustafson, I think, was a slam dunk. He was a 43-point getter between two teams last year. Trouba is decent on the second power play unit, but I think the Rangers could do better, and I think Gustafson slots into that role a little bit, is a little bit more of a better fit than Trouba was. So, again, I like what Chris Drury has done. Are we a lot slower than we were? Yes, but we had a much better offseason than last, and, I have some optimism for this group, for sure.
And please say your piece on Jonathan Quick now, because that was our disagreement.
Oh, yes, of course. Jonathan Quick, a 1-year deal. Again, he's from the area. I don't think, it's the worst thing. Of course, a lot of Ranger fans are going to have disdain towards Jonathan Quick for 2014, right? But for me, I think neither am I. I'm trying to push through it. But for me, in an ideal world, Shades, and I'm sure you would agree with me, I'd love to have Yaroslav Halak back as the backup goaltender to Igor Shesterkin. He was really good during his tenure here. I think he priced himself out. I think the Rangers couldn't afford anything more than a league minimum contract or $800,000 contract, whatever Quick signed for, to bring him back. So, for me, I think Quick is a decent goaltender to bring in. And they got Dylan Garand in Hartford. You have depth down in the AHL if he were to falter. But again, this is one of the best, if not the best, American-born goaltender of all time. Definitely past his years, but played pretty well for the Vegas Golden Knights since getting traded by the Kings at the deadline last season. So,
well, that's what happens when you light a fire under a player's ass. They tend to bounce back for a short period of time.
Yes.
But lastly, I said it earlier, I'll say it again. A little bit of a mixed bag, mostly positive for me.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat.
moving on to the Ottawa Senators, the only two things of note that they did, they gave Jonas Korpisalo a 5-year deal with a cap hit of $4 million. I'm more of a fan of that contract than you are, because I think Korpisalo is actually a decent goalie, and $4 million for a goalie who's going to be your number one. Let's face it, that's usually pretty good value. He's not Jordan Bennington.
Yeah, for me, Korpisalo played pretty well last year in Columbus, and after getting traded to the Kings. But before that, he was pretty abysmal. I just, the money is not really the concern here, Shades. It's really the term. And giving 5-year contracts to goaltenders with not great track records hasn't really worked out in the past. Besides that, they didn't really make any significant moves, but let's hope that this is the goaltender signing for the Senators to really help them get back into playoff contention. Because remember, Shades, we all thought a couple of years ago Cam Talbot was going to be that guy, and by the time he left the Senators organization, he wasn't even the starter. So things can change really quick.
Yeah, and the only other thing of note that they gave restricted free agent Jacob Bernard Docker, who was their first-round pick a couple of years back, 2-year deal, $805,000 a year. Other than that, the Senators did absolutely nothing.
Yep, Brandstrom signed a 1-year contract, but that's it.
Yeah, whole lot of nothing. The Philadelphia Flyers. This is where it got somewhat interesting, but again, they also, in my opinion, did not do too much. Actually, no, they really didn't do too much. So in terms of free agent signings, Garnet Hathaway signed a 2-year deal worth $2.375 million a year. Hathaway is a good player. To me, that just screams trade piece because they're tearing it all down. And they traded Kevin Hayes to the St. Louis Blues, 50% cap retention for a 2024 6th-round pick. I'm amazed they were not able to get more for him, but they're just dumping everything and anything. And St. Louis gets Kevin Hayes at a very good cap hit. Flyers tearing it down. Other than that, they did absolutely nothing of note. Ryan Paling got a 1-year deal worth $1.4 million. That's all I got. What do you got?
Yeah, besides Hathaway and Paling, that's pretty much it. I like the addition of Garnet Hathaway. Doesn't move the needle. No, it does not. Philadelphia is in a clear rebuilding mode. We talked about it before we went on record here. That what's the future for Carter Hart? He was involved in trade discussions early on in the offseason. So I think that there's a lot to be had with the rest of the Flyers offseason. And I think it starts with Carter Hart, and I think we'll see more of that on the trade market. But as far as free agent goes, they bring in 2 solid depth guys in Paling and Hathaway. That's it.
Yep, that really is it. The Pittsburgh Penguins have had a interesting offseason, to say the least. They've actually made a number of signings. But before we get to the signings, let's talk about the trade. They acquired Riley Smith from the Vegas Golden Knights for a 2024 3rd-round pick. And as soon as I saw that trade, I was just like, God damn it. That's a great trade for Pittsburgh. And and as soon as that happened, I was just like, why would Vegas do Smith dirty like that? But then I went, at least they won the cup with them before they traded him. But yeah.
Yeah, one of the few original Vegas Golden Knights gets traded to the Pittsburgh Penguins. One of Kyle Dubas's first trade, running the operations over there in Pittsburgh. So again, I like the move. You bring in a Stanley Cup champion from last year in Riley Smith, somebody who can slot into the top 6. He's the type of guy that if he plays with a Sidney Crosby, if he plays with an Evgeny Malkin, could have himself a career year. So I like the signing. Noel Acciari, a 3-year contract. Again, right, that's a player that Kyle Dubas had in Toronto. Ryan Graves, a 6-year deal. That's definitely pretty risky. He wasn't great, especially in the playoffs with the Devils. And 6-year contracts are always, the term is always a little bit of an eyebrow raiser. Tristan Jarry, a 5-year deal. I'm so happy Jarry is returning.
I didn't think he was the problem in Pittsburgh last year.
I didn't think he was the problem either. But again, I still don't think he's a top 15 goalie, maybe top 10 goalie in the league. Lars Eller, 2-year contract. I love Eller as a bottom 6 piece. Got to tip my cap there. and Alex Nedeljkovic provides more goaltending depth. Of course, they're without Casey DeSmith, and they bring back Zahorna and Hellberg as well. So, again, really depth pieces. Again, just filling out the roster. I like Kyle Dubas. I like the way that he thinks, the way that he constructs teams. I don't think that, the demise of the Toronto Maple Leafs or the result that the Maple Leafs have had in the last number of years while he was at the helm was necessarily his fault. And I think he comes to Pittsburgh with a blank slate with superstar talent who is, albeit aging. And I think he did well in his first offseason, first couple of days.
Yeah. Just to put the cap hits out there, Matt Nieto, 1 year, 2 years, $900,000 a year. Nedeljkovic, 1 year, 1.5 mil. That's actually a pretty good cap hit for Nedeljkovic. Jari, we said 5 years, 5.375. That questionable, but yeah. Moving on, Lars Eller, 2 years, 2.4 mil, 2.45 mil. That's a solid contract for both him and the team. Ryan Graves, 6 years, $4.5 million a year. I'm a fan of Graves, but I'm not a fan of $4.5 million a year. Achari, 3 years, $2 million a year, good value. And yeah, so I would give Pittsburgh overall a pretty good mark.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd give him a good mark as well.
Moving on, San Jose Sharks. We've touched upon the Steven Lorentz and Anthony Duclair swap from earlier. We touched upon the Mackenzie Blackwood trade that they acquired him from the Devils. In terms of free agent signings, they signed Ryan Carpenter, Rangers legend, to a 2-way deal, 1 year, $775,000. Mackenzie Blackwood got a 2-year deal worth $2.35 million a year. Not bad for him. And apart from that, they really didn't do anything.
Yeah, Xavier Zetterlund signed a 2-year contract. That's pretty much it.
Yeah, 1.45. Kyle Burrows signed a 1-way, 3-year deal, 1.1 million. Yeah, that's really about it. Sharks are also kind of directionless right now. They're looking to trade Erik Karlsson, but until that happens, I don't really have much to say about the Sharks.
Yeah, I don't have much to say either. I mean, they signed Blackwood. Maybe Blackwood can, reignite his career with a good opportunity in San Jose. Like you said, 2.35 million. That's a decent cap hit, but pretty cut and dry where the Sharks are at right now.
Yeah, exactly. The Seattle Kraken. Honestly, they didn't do much either. They're honestly one of the teams that did almost actually nothing. But I will say this. They did make one very good signing. Brian Dumoulin, 2 years, $3.15 million. I was shocked Pittsburgh did not want to keep him because I honestly thought Dumoulin was one of their better defensemen these last 4 or 5 years. So the fact that they let him go is kind of shocking in my opinion, but that's a good pickup by Seattle. Other than that, I have nothing to say about them. You?
Yeah, I like Brian Dumoulin a lot, especially in his time in Pittsburgh. And the Penguins are going to miss him. And the Kraken, again, I thought they had really good defensive depth all throughout last year. Big reason why they made it all the way to the semifinals, Game 7 against the Dallas Stars. They lose a couple of players that stand out for me. Morgan Geekie was a big part of their identity. He goes to Boston, like we talked about earlier. And Daniel Sprong, although he's been a guy that's been, kind of in and out of the league, 21 goals last year. They just let his rights go and he gets signed by the Detroit Red Wings. So again, a couple interesting decisions, but I like the addition of Dumoulin. Would like to see more scoring though over the next over the offseason.
Yes, exactly. Moving on to the St. Louis Blues. There really is not a whole lot here, is there?
I guess just the Kevin Hayes trade, right?
Yeah, basically. Apart from that, I mean, I don't even recognize half these names. They re-signed or extended a bunch of guys, bunch of RFAs. That's about it. That really is about it. I don't know where the Blues are going right now. They're definitely retooling, but until they get rid of that Bennington deal, they're kind of stuck where they are.
I think they're in a rebuild mode. I think they're heading that way. We'll see.
Yeah, that they are. But until, like I said, until Bennington goes, they're going to be where they are. The Tampa Bay Lightning. We touched upon the Ross Colton deal earlier, losing him. We touched upon the Corey Perry deal earlier, losing him. Free agency wise, they signed Luke Glendening, 2 years, $800,000, depth guy. 34. I thought he was a little older. Josh Archibald signed a 2-year deal, $800,000. Connor Sheary, which I like that signing by them. 3 years, $2 million a year. And yeah, that's about it.
Yeah, Archibald, I think he's been pretty underrated. And, like you said, Connor Sheary, a good playoff performer early in his career, hasn't really been great in the postseason over the last few years. But again, like with the Lightning losing Ross Colton, they were going to need some security, some depth in the bottom six, and they get that in Sheary and Archibald. And again, they're really cash strapped. So, they needed to make moves between the margins, and I feel like they made the right ones. Good moves.
Yeah. The Toronto Maple Leafs, Kyle Dubas's ex-stomping grounds. They gave Ryan Reeves a 3-year contract, and I just laughed. $1.135 million a year. They signed John Klingberg, 1 year, $4.15 million a year. I laughed. David Kempf, unrestricted before he had unrestricted free agency, agreed to a 4-year deal worth $2.4 million a year. Pontus Holmberg, same thing, except 2 years, $800,000 a year. And yeah, that's really about it.
Yeah, I mean, like you, I laughed at the Reeves contract too. I mean, 3 years. You talk about overreacting, trying to fix your team's problems. I don't think Ryan Reeves at a $1.3 million a season cap hit is the answer necessarily. I don't think John Klingberg on a 1-year deal is the answer either. I don't really know what Brad Freeliving is thinking here in Toronto. Again, I'm going to let the rest of the offseason play out, but for the first 2 or 3 moves here, I'm scratching my head.
Yeah, I don't think that helps Toronto at all, to be completely honest with you. But I digress. Maybe it works out for them. Who knows? But I doubt it. The Vancouver Canucks. They are also they made a number of intriguing signings, a few. Teddy Bluger, 1 year, $1.9 million. Actually, that's pretty good value for Bluger, in my opinion. Decent bottom six forward. Carson Soucy, 3 years, $3.25 million a year. Carson Soucy is a player that flies a little bit under the radar around the league, so I kind of like that for them. And then there's Ian Cole, 1 year, $3 million. Again, all these moves combined are really not going to move the needle much. They haven't made a trade since March, and yeah, this is another team. I don't know what they're doing.
Yeah, Teddy Bluger, penalty killing forward. Ian Cole, defensive defenseman. A 1-year contract each for a team that's not close to a Stanley Cup. Carson Soucy, a 3-year deal. I liked him back in Minnesota, but has really kind of fallen off since then. And kind of stagnant for the Vancouver Canucks, I'd say.
Yeah. You want to talk about being stuck in the middle? They are the epitome of that.
Yep. Worst place to be.
Yep, seriously. The Vegas Golden Knights. They re-signed Adin Hill to a 2-year deal, $4.9 million AAV. He deserved it after how he played during the Stanley Cup final run. And it was not the Binnington contract, so 2 years, very low risk in case he doesn't pan out. And then there was the Barbashev signing, 5 years before free agency, before he had unrestricted free agency. 5 years, $5 million a year. We all knew he was going to get paid after the playoff run he had. And that contract could be good. It could suck.
Yeah, I got to be honest. I wasn't a fan of the Adin Hill deal, to be honest. I'm just not a fan of goaltenders getting paid an exuberant amount of money after winning a Stanley Cup. Now, I will say, not the same thing as Jordan Binnington. Nope. Binnington was signed to a 6-year, $36 million deal at a $6 million AAV, and it was a tremendous risk, and it's not working out for St. Louis.
No.
But $4.9 million
for 2 years.
I know for 2 years it's low risk, but next year if Vegas is in a cap struggle and Logan Thompson is back and he's taking back the number one job, it kind of worries me a little bit. I think they might have overreacted. I think the Vegas Golden Knights were a team that, whether it was Laurent Brossoit, Logan Thompson, or Aiden Hill in the net down the stretch in the playoffs, I think they would have won the Stanley Cup with all three goalies. That's kind of just what I think. I don't think Aiden Hill being in the net was necessarily the difference between Vegas winning the cup and not. They were the best team in the playoffs.
I will give him credit though. He was a
was
very major factor, and he played great.
He was good. $5 million in overpay. But I'm happy that Aiden Hill got the contract, obviously he was looking for his entire career. He cashed in on the opportunity. And again, I wish the player and the team the best of luck. I want to see him succeed and build off that $4.9 million. Yeah. I don't want to see Vegas regret it, but I'm worried they might. So we'll see.
Yeah, exactly. And obviously we touched upon the Riley Smith deal from earlier. Cap dump, said see him go. I hate that I have to root against Riley Smith now on the sole basis that he is on the Penguins, but yeah. The Washington Capitals. I don't even know off the top of my head what they did besides trading Joel Edmondson.
They signed Max Pacioretty.
That is right. That's right. I forgot about that.
1-year deal for Pacioretty with the Caps. Again, low risk
cap hit.
$2 million cap hit. Oh, Elias Anderson has signed with the Montreal Canadiens. Sorry, just got that on my phone. Breaking for the former first-round pick of the Rangers. But, yeah, Pacioretty with the Caps, chance to rebuild his value. Again, he's torn the same Achilles 2 straight years in a row, and Pacioretty needs to prove that he can stay healthy for a long amount of time. And if he's able to do that and can maintain his point production, I think he could be in for a nice payday after this 1-year deal. And again, there's no risk for the Capitals. They're not going to make the playoffs. That's not their end goal. And it's a good contract for team and player. So I'm happy for Pacioretty.
And let us also mention that they also signed former Rangers legend Dylan McIlrath.
Well, McIlrath actually won the Calder Cup with the AHL team, the Hershey Bears. He was their captain. So, again, might be seen as a bust, but still making an impact in the developmental league. So happy for McIlrath. He gets that well-deserved extension. And again, still hanging around in the league, even if he's not a Ranger anymore. So.
Oh, yeah. And apart from that, the Capitals really, really did not do much.
Yeah.
And last but not least, before we get to our winners and losers, the Winnipeg Jets. I've kind of been a fan of their offseason so far, solely based on that Pierre-Luc Dubois trade. Just being honest here. Apart from that, they really didn't. They made a trade today, but it's between two minor leaguers, so that's a wash. Laurent Brossoit signed a 1-year deal, $1.75 million, be a backup goalie. The Hellebuck situation has yet to come to its conclusion, but that's a story for another episode. Vladislav Nemestikov, 2 years, $2 million a year, middle six forward, decent guy to have on the team. And then, we did touch upon the Dubois trade. He signed that extension before he got traded because it was a sign-in trade. And then Colin Delia, 1 year, $775,000. I think they're just preparing themselves to have 2 goalies on the roster in case Hellebuck does, in fact, get dealt before the start of the season. And again, team, apart from the Dubois trade, not much going on here.
Yeah, not too much going on. Delia signs 1 year. Again, like you said it well, they're gearing up for the potential loss of Connor Hellebuck, and they need some goaltending depth on the roster to be able to do that. Vladislav Nemestikov, I like the signing, comes in, he'll play in the bottom 9. And for me, I gave the Kings a lot of praise when we were talking about the Pierre-Luc Dubois trade, about a few minutes ago. And what Winnipeg got back, I think, should not be understated. Rasmus Kupari is a very good young forward, as is Gabriel Velarde, as is Aaron Iafallo.
Alex Iafallo.
Alex Iafallo, excuse me.
That's Brendan's boy.
Yes, yeah, that's Brendan's boy. But again, they get 3 solid players for one that wasn't really a fit in their locker room or on their team. So Winnipeg might have a down year this upcoming season, especially after last year where they, I think, exceeded expectations.
Yeah. But if they do, in fact, deal Hellebuck and get a good return, very good damage control, in my opinion. But like I said, story for another podcast.
Yep, for sure. It's going to be one of the most interesting storylines going forward here, what Winnipeg decides to do with Hellebuck. And again, you could say Delia is an AHL signing, but I think bringing in 2 goaltenders on the first day and a half of free agency, that kind of indicates that there could be a shakeup at the goaltending position. And I'm very, very intrigued to see what happens with Hellebuck for sure.
Same. All right, so encompassing everything, trades before the draft, trades of draft day, signings in free agency. Who would you say is your number 1 winner?
My number 1 winner is New Jersey. I mentioned it earlier, but again, they re-signed the 2 guys that they had to. Jesper Bratt didn't have the greatest playoffs, but you can't forget how impactful he's been during his entire tenure with the Devils. He's a guy who can play up and down the lineup. He has really come into his own over the last couple of seasons. Timo Meier wasn't the player that I think a lot of Devils fans expected him to be coming over from the Sharks at the trade deadline. But again, he's still such a powerful force, and you get a player that was expected to get, remember, $9.5 to $10.5 million on the open market. You get him 8 times 8.5. That's a really solid value contract for a superstar player. And you add Tyler Toffoli as well. Toffoli, again, he's aging like fine wine, right? Ever since he was a part of that 70s line with the Los Angeles Kings back when they won the Stanley Cup in 2012 and 2014, he has just continued to be a mainstay in the league and be productive in every single season. And I don't see how that stops in New Jersey. So for me, the Devils definitely win. And if they come out somehow, some way of this offseason with Connor Hellebuck, that might be one of the best off seasons we've seen in quite a long time from any team. So for me, they're my number 1 winner.
It's very hard to disagree with you, but I'm going to go a different team just for the sake of variety, because I feel like we agree too much on things. I'm actually going to go with the Carolina Hurricanes, because they extended key players at very good cap hits, and they brought back Freddie Anderson at a wonderful cap hit. They signed Dmitry Orlov, who's going to fit in like a glove on that team, in my personal opinion. And while the Bunting contract isn't the best, they brought in a player who, in my opinion, is going to also fit that forward group like a glove, and especially under Rob Brindamore, just be a major problem in a great way for them. And I just really like all 6 of the guys they signed being unrestricted free agents and extending guys.
Yeah, no, you can't say anything bad about the Carolina Hurricanes and what they did. The Bunting contract is a little bit iffy for me, but again, you acknowledged it. And Orlov is the number 1 defenseman that every team needs. So I like their offseason so far as well.
Yeah, of course, it has to be 2 good teams in the Metro, but whatever.
Right.
So as there are winners, there are always losers. Like I said, going to be the same exact question, encompassing everything, moves prior to and after the draft trade-wise and free agent signings. Who is your biggest loser?
Well, Shades, it's a shame, right? Because when I announced my biggest winner, you said you didn't want to agree with me. But I think that there's no way you disagree with me on this one, because the biggest loser is the Toronto Maple Leafs. And I don't think it's particularly close. So Shades, if you disagree with me, I'll be pretty shocked. But for a lack of moves, they have players remained that are unsigned. They bring in Ryan Reeves to that atrocious 3-year contract. They lose depth on the blue line in Justin Hall, and they have really made no additions of significance. They lose 1 general manager in Kyle Dubas for another one in Brad Treliving that is doing worse things with the roster than Dubas was doing in the first place. So, yeah, early on, there's a lot of offseason to be had. But for me, the loser is the Toronto Maple Leafs, and it's pretty clear cut.
All right. Well, just for the sake of variety again, I'm going to go with a different team. Although I 100% agree with you, and I brought very valid reasoning to the table. But I am going to go with the Los Angeles Kings. Because I
Okay.
look at all the guys that they gave up and the one guy
Fair.
significance that they brought in. They bring in Pierre-Luc Dubois at, in my opinion, a horrible cap hit with horrible term, because I don't think he is that guy. And they gave up Kupari, Iafallo, the second round pick, Velarde. They also lose Sean Dursey, and all they have to show for losing all those guys is a overpaid locker room problem. In my opinion, the Maple Leafs and the Kings are the two biggest losers so far.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously, I feel a little bit different about the Dubois trade. Did they give up a lot prospect-wise? Absolutely. Kupari, Velarde, and Iafallo are three very good young players, and who knows, maybe one or even two of those players end up being better than Pierre-Luc Dubois in the long run, right? You never know with trades like that. But I definitely think that Pierre-Luc Dubois, his attitude problems are well noted. I think it's a young Kings team that needs to form their identity, right? If they want to make that push towards the playoffs. So when you're formulating that identity, you have to be very careful about who you bring into that locker room to lead, right? Because although, the intention may not be to bring in Pierre-Luc Dubois to be a leader, you're bringing a guy in on an 8-year contract. He's going to be there for a very long time.
Yep.
And again, a guy that has been traded a few times in his career already. I don't necessarily think there's interest on either side to move on from one another anytime soon. So things have to get off on the right foot from the very start. And, I think there's risk to whether or not that's going to happen. I don't think that they're the biggest loser, but I do think that there's potential for their little retool and nice upbringing of young players to fall apart here. So I'll agree with you on that end.
Fun fact, his contract is a straight up contract. There's no trade clause. There is no movement clause, nothing partial. They can get rid of him whenever they please if they happen to strike a deal. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so your biggest loser is the Maple Leafs, which I agree with, but I'm still going to go with the Kings.
Sounds good.
And that was a lot of information to go through. Holy shit. I might as well just finish my cold brew right now.
Take that last sip.
All right, one more. I still got one more sip, and I got to go to work. Oh, boy. Don't you just love hockey?
Love it.
So much can happen within literally like 3 or 4 days. This was at least an hour and 47 minutes of a podcast, one of the longest episodes we've ever done. I don't think it was quite the longest, but it is certainly up there. And yeah, I'm all tapped out. You got anything?
I don't think I have anything. Just another good episode of Pucks and Brews. Great to be back with you, Shades. I feel sorry that you're back at work after this, but hopefully it'll go fast for you and no extra innings tonight, right?
No, please, God, no. Please, God, no. I've already had some bad luck this homestand, but I digress. So thank you everyone for listening this was episode 46 of Pucks and Brews. Thank you everyone for listening. Now I'm tripping over my words if I wasn't already before, which I feel like this was a pretty good episode in terms of me tripping over my words compared to previous episodes. But this has been episode 46. I have been your host, Michael Shade Sparacino, joined by, he's back, Liam, because I didn't have you last episode. Liam, the Chillmaster Godimer. Follow us on all of our socials listed in the description below. And we will be back probably after Vladimir Tarasenko, the biggest fish in the free agent market, signs his deal which is what is going to be a significantly shorter episode. And depending on what happens, unless something major happens, we will probably be taking our usual hiatus during the summer. And now, to finish off this podcast, I will legitimately, just so you can see, finish off my cold brew. And there it is. Everybody, hope you enjoyed the first day of free agency. And until we're back, enjoy the summer so far, because we will be back with at least one episode. Thank you everyone for listening, and we will catch you next time.